So first off, new podcast in the description. I talked about how I became a fan of the NBA because it's pretty dry in the actual NBA right now. And then I gave my opinion on Black Panther, the new movie that just came out. And now we're going to talk about Isaiah Thomas, who was recently picked up by the Los Angeles Lakers, or he was in the trade, where they sent away Jordan Clarkson as well as Larry Nance's contracts for Isaiah Thomas's expiring. And of course, the time in Cleveland was not very good at all, on and off the floor for Isaiah. But does he still have a chance in the NBA? You know, what can he be in terms of how good can he be, and is he still a starter? Does he have to come off the bench now? Is he that sixth man scorer that he was before he was with the Celtics? What's with Isaiah Thomas at this point? Well, I think getting out of Cleveland was a good first step for him, right? And now with the Los Angeles Lakers, I don't know if he'll be on this team past this season, right? A lot of it's going to depend on what he is willing to accept for a potential contract. I mean, the Lakers are still going to be all in on the Paul George sweepstakes, and for their sake, Andre Robertson getting hurt makes that look a little bit more possible because, well, losing Andre Robertson just makes OKC a worse team. And if you have Paul George and then you think you can get close to Boston Celtic Isaiah Thomas, well, then you kind of got something going on there. You would need more players, of course, but it's something, of course. But now, can Isaiah Thomas actually be that player? Well, I think based on his first 2 games with the Lakers, a very small sample size. Actually, he's played 3 games, but in one of them he barely played, so we're going to go with the game against the Mavericks, where he was very good, and the game against the T-Wolves, where he was not so good. Now, against Dallas, he was really just being himself, right? He was taking pull-up threes, he was moving off ball a little bit, he was beating guys off the dribble, playing in pick and roll, just doing the signature Isaiah Thomas thing. And then against the T-Wolves, he was doing also the same thing, but there were a couple more possessions where he was not able to get separation. He one time had Towns switched onto him, and Cat blocked his shot because Isaiah was just not able to burst past him as much. There were a couple of times where he was able to get by the initial defender, but then when he was in the air, like a big man could slide over and contest his shot or block it, or he was contested at the rim by the guy who he was originally defended by. So there are definitely moments where the signature Isaiah Thomas burst and his leaping ability is just not as good. You could make the argument that he shouldn't have played this year at all because of how bad he was with the Cavaliers. But you could also make the argument that Ty Lue just having a super basic system combined with Isaiah Thomas's hip problems made it to where he just couldn't really do much, you know? And I think Luke Walton is a better head coach than Ty Lue, so we could see Isaiah down the stretch of this season just having more action off the ball. I mean, his very first basket against the Mavericks was kind of like a floppy set where he just went along the baseline, got a couple of screens, came up top for a three-pointer, and it was good, you know? And I think he's going to need more of those because you would hope that he can be healthy. And until he really gets to that point, and I think it's fair to believe he's not going to really get there this season, but you can help him out by not asking him to just be in pick and rolls all the time, because it's just more difficult, right? Like, it's tougher to get by a guy who's defending you one-on-one than it is to go around screens and all that stuff. Now, Isaiah Thomas is the type of dude where he likes to, do his own thing, and he likes to bring the ball up, and he's got a bit of an ego to him, justified before this season, of course. So there's going to be times when he takes some pull-up threes that are not beautiful. I mean, he had his fair share against the T-Wolves. I remember there was one play where Taj Gibson was switched onto him, and I believe there was still a decent amount of time left in the shot clock. He could have took him off the bounce, but he just took a pull-up three from like a foot behind the three-point line. And a lot of those threes, when they didn't go in, they were short, which tells you he doesn't have the lift, which makes sense given the hip injury, right? So all the more reason to get him moving a little bit more, whether it be in cuts or just try to get him some more open three-pointers. Make it as easy for him as you possibly can, you know? And if we can talk about more just for the Lakers this season, I actually think there's a chance he could play with Lonzo Ball some. You would have Lonzo defend the better of the perimeter players on the other team, and then you have Isaiah defend the worst dude, of course. And I think Luke Walton is smart enough to hide Isaiah on defense. And if we get back to the offense, I mean, Isaiah has always been content with playing off ball. Of course, strived in it under the Celtics. Lonzo is a better playmaker than Isaiah. You also just want to give the ball to Lonzo because he's 20 years old, and you want to give him those reps. So I do think they could have some life together on the floor at the same time. But of course, you got to talk about the future with Isaiah as well. I don't think we're going to see Boston Celtics Isaiah Thomas ever again. Because, number one, that season you could have viewed as just an incredible hot streak that he was not going to maintain anyway. But then you have this hip issue, right? And given that you're 5'7", 5'8", whatever he is, doesn't take much, you know? But do I think he can still be a quality scorer for a team coming off the bench and occasionally having big games, and he could have like a 30-point game in a playoff series and that sort of thing? Yes, definitely. I think, look, Isaiah, I don't think he's done as a player. I just think he's done being one of the, I don't know, top 20 players? Was he a top 20 player last year for the Celtics? Probably. He probably was maybe top 12 or top 13 or so. I know the defense was bad, but the offense was incredible. So he's not that anymore, but could he be like Nick Van Exel, who just comes in as the short scorer, left-hander, who just makes plays happen? Yeah, I think he could do that pretty okay. Part of the reason why I think he should be coming off the bench, besides that he's just not going to be as good on offense, is still the defense. For Isaiah Thomas to still be a positive for you, given his defense, which is really bad, he's got to be doing a lot on offense, right? And if the new Isaiah Thomas is going to be a, let's say, a 15-point scorer off the bench, decently efficient, makes threes and all that stuff, but he's still a really bad defender, then you're probably not going to want him playing 34 minutes a game like he played for the Celtics last season, right? So that drops him down maybe to 25 a game. Then it becomes a little bit more manageable. And I do think he's still a guy who you could have in big moments. Maybe a team's crunch time lineup, he could still be in there. Because it's easier to hide a bad defensive perimeter player than it is to hide like a bad defensive center, for example. Like, I don't think him being bad on defense is as disastrous for a team as it is for like Enes Kanter being bad on defense, you know? Still has some rough moments, and whatever team he ends up on, the head coach better know how to hide him, but I do think it's a little bit more manageable. So, ultimately, yeah, I think Isaiah still has a place in the NBA. I do think, again, maybe shouldn't have been playing this season at all. But given that it was the Cavs and LeBron and there was so much pressure for him to play, there was basically no way that he wasn't going to, right? Especially because he's in a contract season as well. Now, the interesting thing with Isaiah, there's many interesting things here, but one thing I want to talk about with his free agency is where he could potentially end up. Again, there is the Lakers. I mean, he'd have to play pretty damn well down the stretch here, and they would also have to get pretty much only one star in free agency, because if they got two, then, you know, or if they want to get two, if they think they can, then they got to start letting pretty much everybody go to get as much money as they can. But again, maybe if he just balls out, they decide to keep him for not too much. But the other thing is, he could accept a mid-level, and I believe the mid-level is now like $7 or $8 million. So any team that is currently over the cap but not at the luxury tax could scoop him up, and there's a decent amount of teams who could use his offense. And the mid-level, it's 8.5 million for a team that is under the luxury tax of 123 million. And even though the salaries are not beautiful for a lot of teams, the majority of the league is under the luxury tax. So between teams like the T-Wolves, the Hornets, Pistons, Clippers, Blazers, Nuggets, Celtics, Bucks, Grizzlies, all those teams would qualify for the mid-level. Now, maybe Isaiah wouldn't end up on a winner, but, I mean, hey, if he could get $8 million for like 3 years from the Grizzlies, well, then I think you take it. Hopefully he ends up on a good team, because it's fun watching Isaiah Thomas in big situations. Of course, king of the fourth and all that, but it'll be interesting to see what happens, man. I do not think he will be any team's first option in free agency, probably not their second, maybe not their third, but once the initial crop of guys go and Isaiah's sitting there, I guarantee you someone will give him a chance, because I just don't think he's done. I think he still has a lot of offensive value that we may not see too much this season, just because it just doesn't seem like he's all the way healthy yet. Now, I did say earlier, I'm talking about the mid-level at $8 million. He might get less than that. Teams might be really concerned with him, and if everybody's just throwing him offers of like $4 or $5 million a year, then he might have to really settle. That also opens up the options for where he could end up, because at that point he could end up almost anywhere. I mean, you see a team like the Orlando Magic, who have struggled offensively for a while now and are desperate to just get some excitement and sell some tickets. Someone like that could say, why not? We're already bad, we might as well just take a swing here. So, yeah. It is unfortunate that Isaiah Thomas is in this position because of an injury, because of how good he was for the Celtics, and I do think he can still be pretty good, but the insanely efficient, reckless dude who was putting up 30 a game, I don't know if that's coming back, but that doesn't mean he's done. Anyway, that's gonna do it. Shout out to Isaiah Thomas, new podcast, how I became an NBA fan, and then Black Panther.